Hey class, so today's thesis defense video is going to be um, on, well, it's going to cover my primary research question that I want to address at the beginning of this class, and that was how did Native Americans prevent and shape American westward expansion during the 19th century. And through my research, I quickly realized that when we're talking about the Native Americans most responsible for this, we're talking about two major players sharing many key similarities. And both of these Native American peoples, the Comanche and the Lakota Sioux, occupied the Great Plains region. The Comanche in the south, in the Great Plains of what is modern day Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Colorado, and the Lakota Sioux occupy the Great Plains region in what are the Dakotas, Montana, and Wyoming, and part of Nebraska. And this Great Plains region, this was the major corridor through which American settlers would need to pass into what was Mexico's former northern territories, and into Oregon Territory, which had been ceded by the British during the middle of the 19th century. Unfortunately, however, these American settlers had to pass through the sovereign territories controlled by the Comanche in the south and the Lakota in the north. Um, and so the American empire expanding westward, bringing Anglo-American civilization, democracy, values, bringing the white race. It wasn't exactly stopped in its tracks, but it was severely hindered by the military power of the Comanche and the Lakota. Interestingly enough, the American Empire was more or less stopped in its tracks by, I'm sorry, not stopped in its tracks, but severely hindered by two other empires. We a lot of times think of the Native Americans as kind of victims of colonization, of military conflict, of repression, of eviction from their lands. But ironically, the Comanche and the Lakota did the same exact thing to the Native Americans occupying the plains territories that they took over. Neither of these tribes was native to the region. In the Comanches' case, they had moved into the region from the Great Basin area of Colorado and New Mexico. Before that, they'd split from the Shoshone maybe in the 1590s and it gradually made their way south on the Colorado Front Range, where they'd allied with the Utes, another Ute Aztec and speaking tribe, and raided Spanish settlements in New Mexico. And they adopted a Plains Indian lifestyle, hunting the buffalo, living a nomadic life on the plains later on in the history of their people. And when they got to the southern plains, they very violently and mercilessly displaced the Apache and other people living there, and basically forced any remaining tribes to enter into, such as the Kiowa, to enter into a junior partnership with them as allies. The Lakota did much the same. The Lakota Sioux emigrated from what is now southwestern Minnesota into the northern Great Plains, displacing tribes like the Crow, taking over sacred lands, the Black Hills, and displacing any other tribes or forcing other tribes to enter into an allied partnership with them. Um, and so these tribes had, done their own colonizing efforts, had, put into program a place of colonization, resettling other peoples, even almost annihilating militarily others, very similar to what the United States did with Native American tribes advancing westward. And so during the 19th century, the United States had to tread very carefully, both in Comancheria, the lands of the Comanches in the south, primarily Texas, and the Lakota Sioux territories in the Dakotas, Wyoming, Montana. They had to basically, the way they allowed white settlers and the American military into these regions was to negotiate several peace treaties with the Comanche and the Sioux that basically recognized the sovereign territories of these nations while also allowing for trading posts and forts built to guard them, which was kind of a sneaky way to ensure an American military presence and a civilian presence around these forts and military bases that could then grow. American soldiers in the forts often looked the other way when whites came in to hunt the buffalo or came in to look for gold, which was against the stipulations, most of the treaties, but they allowed it anyway. And they're kind of the American authorities playing fast and loose with these treaties is what engendered the two conflicts. The Red River War, which was when the Comanche, the last remaining Comanche that refused to relocate to reservations um, in either the Texas Panhandle or Southwest Indian Territory, the holdouts that were still roaming free on the Great Plains, they fought a war with the United States military from 1874 to 1875, at the close of which these tribes were relocated to reservations in southwest Oklahoma. And the Great Sioux War of 1866 to 1876 to 1877 was fought in the northern Great Plains region in the Dakotas and Wyoming and Montana between the Lakota and their allies, mostly Cheyenne and Arapaho Indians, who were incensed at the United States breaking the terms of the Great Sioux Treaty of 1868 and allowing American settlers and gold miners into the Black Hills regions, which were part of the unceded Indian territory with which whites were not supposed to enter. Um, and in both these conflicts, the Native Americans, the Comanche and the Sioux, fought very well. They used their knowledge of cavalry warfare, horseback warfare, their knowledge of the territory to wreak havoc on the American forces, winning many major battles, such as when the Lakota forces won the Battle of Little Bighorn, annihilating little less than 300 Americans with minimal Indian losses after entrapping them in a canyon. Um, and the Sioux and the Comanche both only really lost these conflicts because their food source had been disappearing, their herds of buffalo, and also because the United States had cut off their supplies of weapons. They're no longer really able to trade with the Spanish or the French, who were gone by that point, for the most up-to-date military rifles, revolvers, ammunition, that sort of thing. Um, so yeah, basically it was fascinating doing this study and realizing that the United States in advancing westward really had to tread carefully, was very fearful of the ability of the Comanche and the Sioux to conduct effective military raids on both settlers and military forts, especially isolated ones, or on warfare in the open plains. And they basically had to gradually, through treaties that slowly diminish the size, the sovereign territories of the Comanche and Sioux, and allow military forts to be built. They had to slowly build up their presence and slowly chip away at the sovereign boundaries in order to achieve eventual victory in the area. And the sources for my research paper, there are some really good ones, especially on the primary source side. I'd like to bring the attention of the class to two books by Jerome Greene. One is called Battle and Skirmishes of the Great Sioux War, 1866 to 1877, the military view. One is called Lakota and Cheyenne Indian Views of the Great Sioux War, 1876 to 1877. And these are a collection of primary interviews and first-hand accounts from both Lakota Sioux and American military members of the battles of the Great Sioux War, the conditions on the field, the weather, the climate, the disease, what the hand-to-hand combat was like, what the cavalry battles were like. Yeah, anybody wanting to get a really good idea of this war, I would recommend these works to them. And it looks like I'm running over the time limit, so um, this was a very interesting paper to write. My thanks to Dr. Sneeringer, not sure how you say it, for teaching this class, and I hope you all have a blessed day.